Hello, everybody. Got some more stuff to go over from the other day. Visual elements. We looked at colors. Quickly looked at borders and shadows at the end because I figure y'all might want to start doing something soon. A little bit more to talk about with both borders and shadows. Images. We looked at fonts the other day and things that start making our website look very nice very, very quickly. A lot of concept there, right? Or a lot of tools, but our example was just kind of randomly doing them, right? I was picking colors at random, border and size, shadow sizes. It was just to show the syntax for it. So also today, we want to go over the more conceptual stuff, design principles, the sort of thing graphic artists focus on. Principles with design is the normal category for it. Yeah, I guess preview, we're going to talk about it in detail, but things like repetition, contrast, proximity, alignment, how we use those tools we're looking at the other day, and then we'll continue looking at today in order to make a really nice looking website, something that people like looking at. Make people want to spend more time on our website. Okay, this computer rebooted, so I'll go ahead and sign into, whoops, not sign in. I'll log on to the Zoom call from here. We're going to start with more example sort of things. I'll write names down when we take a break. Does anybody have any questions before we get started here? Stuff so far. There's a little bit of trouble getting those domains up and going. A couple people said they had trouble with it. Did all those get resolved? I think so. Well, if there's anything, let me know. For now, I guess we can kind of jump in and continue looking at some more things like we were looking at the other day. I guess I'll just continue on the same example. It's still here on my computer, and yeah, we're doing random things on the page in order to see what the tools look like, and then after the break today, we'll talk about the design principles so that we have a better idea of what to do with those tools. I'm going to open these files from the other day with my text editor. If you're on a Windows machine, if you can open it from like PowerShell or your terminal or something, you can open it from the address bar. So I'm just going to open the text editor in this directory. Oh wait, no, this isn't the one. Sorry, that was last week's example, wasn't it? I need to delete that from my computer so I don't do that again. It's still open. There be anything open in it. That was weird. Let me try to go into the example for Monday, week 3, this one. Okay, here's what we were looking at the other day. Just some lorem ipsum text and a few random HTML elements, because we're mostly talking about style sheets this week, or style and design attributes. So we're all interested in this one. The book shows a basic syntax for putting on assigning font families, and this one I found to be much more useful. Even if it's a font I would expect to be on somebody's computer, like say Times New Roman. We could probably count on that being on everybody's computer, but that's still no guarantee, right? So even the common fonts, I'll still do this way. I'll go ahead and set them up, and then that way send the font as a resource for the website, and I know for certain it'll work. So just some start talking about sizing things, some colors. There's a lot of different sizing ones. EMs can be really nice. Those lasted for many, many centuries for a good reason. Might not be intuitive at first, so you might want to just kind of play around with that size and get used to how it looks. But when we use those sizing units, remember that's the size of the largest letter in the font we're using. So all the sizes of our data are based off the data we're displaying. It leads to some nice consistency things. And then we saw a little bit more with selectors. If we want to select more than one element at a time and apply the same rule to multiple things, which is something we're going to want to do a lot, right? We don't put every color we know about on every web page we make. We have a short number of colors and scatter that around. So they're going to apply to multiple elements. So that'll be a very common thing as we move forward. And then we looked at borders and box shadows. Let's see where else. I'll use the third bullet. Looks like there's some space to type things there. So generically, we usually want some sort of shadows and borders, and they're going to go off on two sides at once. So that's the way they basically look. If we just say we want a box shadow, it comes off the bottom and the sides. We just say we want a border, it shows up on every side. But we do have more control over them than just that. I'll use the third one here. Actually, I'm going to change this border. So we did a dashed border. We have multiple types because I was kind of rushed at the end. Okay. Instead of dashed, obviously solids on there. Set up a solid line. Or if we're looking at different things, a good place to change CSS is to jump over to the inspector panel. And then on the sources tab, we should be able to edit the CSS right here and see the changes, which can be really, really useful for looking for a particular color or style of some sorts that we want. Just remember it doesn't save when we type it here. So instead of solid, do double lines for borders. And obviously you have to have it wide enough you need at least 3 pixels to have a double. That should be obvious, right? We need at least 1 pixel for each line and then a pixel between them. There's a few on the list to choose from. And on box shadow, if I type the word outset there, but it doesn't like out. Oops. Let me reload the page. Undo those changes. So yeah, sometimes it's nice when the changes don't save. If you do like I just did and make an accidental typo, so that a whole bunch of things stop working. If we type the word outset here, oops. I didn't like that. Okay. It's ignoring the word outset. So we type it in the code and it works fine. The outset is the default one. Inset puts the shadows internally. I wanted to point at those two. Apparently Google Chrome just ignores the outset word. Doesn't even recognize it. Because those are also borders that we have. So we could do an outset border, which I wanted to show them together. Maybe make that a little bit bigger. 8-pixel border. So you can see the dark and light aspects of that outset border match where the shadow goes. Helps to give some nice contrast or some depth to the page. Similar thing with the inset. That's also a border we have. And if that, you can see here, it's not the light and dark from the inset border doesn't really match so well with what the shadow's doing. So those are kind of designed to go together. We wouldn't want to use that border without having a corresponding shadow. Whoops. I put my fingers in the right spot for the keyboard, and then the light and dark lines up a little bit better. We have further control over that. We'll see that, but things that add some sort of depth to our page. It's supposed to make it look like it's sunk in a little bit. That's just random, so it doesn't necessarily look something there. But and again, those changes, if we edit things there, they don't actually save. So make sure you keep track of what you change there and put it in the actual file. I'm going down to another paragraph that talks more about borders. 2 to 3. I think this third paragraph will probably work for us. It's already singled out somewhere. Maybe we don't want to border on the whole thing, just a little piece of a border. So we could say like the border and do those same abbreviations we had. Like a dotted border, 3 pixels wide, and in some color, 45, 67, 89, whatever color that comes out as. Oh, that's the third paragraph. Probably not helpful to put that on the small one. 2, 3. Yeah, I'll put it on the fourth one. We can see the fourth one. Put it under there, come down a couple spaces and do another selector for the fourth. Oh wait, that's an ID, isn't it? That was an ID, not a class. Now it should show up where I was expecting it, because I forgot to, there we go. So you can see, I zoom way out especially, we only got the border on one side, have more control over it. The big thing there is just take note of the order of words, because it's backwards from English. Obviously, we have all 3 sides there, border, top, left. I'll do one more just for demo, and then we'll look at the next part. Yeah, put it down to the left-hand side. Is that showing on the TV?
Yeah, you can see it.
Okay. I can't see it on the one in the back, but hopefully you can see it on the Zoom call. Maybe if I take some blue out of that color. Nope, that almost matched the background. Let's try more blue in that color. Hey. That should be it. Yeah, okay. I can see it on the TV across the room now. But we can break it down to little pieces too. So let me put that back on the top. Border top. And here we have a style, a size, and a color. So we can break that up into different pieces. The border top style would be dotted. And then these 2 parts need to go to another line, which in my text editor, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-D is duplicate. That's a really useful one if you're heading into programming, because it's pretty common that we'll have a lot of lines right next to each other that look the same and just require a little bit of editing. You might have to check the edit menu for what the duplicate command is. Oh wait, it's not in there. I might have added that custom. I might have actually gone in settings and added that in. But there is a key, there's a pretty much always a keyboard shortcut for duplicating lines in text editors. It's a really useful one. And if you're new to programming, it throws people off at first, right? We're used to speaking English. We go left to right, top to bottom, but we're not typing English here. We're typing CSS code. So top to right, top to bottom, left to right might not be the best order to work on this code in. And it's actually more productive when we have situations like this. A whole lot of lines are going to be the same to work down in columns instead of across. I also go left, usually start on the right and go right to left because then things line up. So like we want this next one to be sizes, put that, I'll make it bigger, 7 pixels in there. That way it shows up on the screen better. Then come down here and put in whatever that color was. I think that was the one that showed. And the reason for doing that is if we go across the line, right, we have words, we have to change our frame of mind several times. Like we're talking about the top border, so that part will be the same. And then when we get to style, we might need to change this part. Then we change our frame of mind and think about what we want that style to be. Then we go on to the next line and start going across, and we get here, and we change our frame of mind back to what this word needs to be, which I guess in this case would be size. And then change our mind frame again to the value that's going to go in that property. So the value gets assigned to a property, and those two things together are called declaration. Make a declaration. Just some keywords you'll see on quizzes and midterm exams. And yeah, I went through and double checked all the quizzes, and that was when I saw this several times. So the property gets a value, and then a property and value together are called a declaration. So CSS is made up of selectors and declarations, which the midterm or final pulls from the same question bank as the weekly quizzes. So there's a chance you'll see that question again. But countering that go across thing, constantly changing them, really we're thinking about it. Is it a keyword? Is it a value we're putting in there? Is it a calculation we need to do? What do we have to remember for that particular spot in the line? If we just change our mindset once, it's like, okay, what are the values I want? Go down this column, get this dotted 7 pixels and the color, that color. And then we come over here and it's like, okay, where are these applying? That's the style, the size, and then the last one, color, if you haven't guessed that already. But notice how we just change our mindset a lot less often doing that. So it ends up being more productive in the long run. We're not typing in English. Top to bottom, left to right is usually not the best way to work it. So watch for little shortcuts like that, and that particular pattern shows up a lot. Check your text editor. Usually the hotkeys are listed under the edit one somewhere, but they duplicate on mine. Yeah, they're pretty much all text editors have a keyboard shortcut for duplicate, and that is it's pretty common that we want to copy. We have a whole bunch of lines of code right next to each other that are very, very similar. So check on what the duplicate keyboard shortcut is, and then practice that going down the columns instead of across. And I also like to do that going right to left, and that way things are still in the same position when I get back to them. So you can see here now that it's finished, things don't necessarily line up quite the same, especially on that 7 pixels is shuffled over. That's a small example, but we haven't talked about it yet. Probably no surprises, right? We can do that. And that gives us the opportunity to do unique borders on each side, right? So you do border, right, style, double. Actually, I'll duplicate that again. So just with the cursor anywhere in the line, hit duplicate a couple times. Then 9 pixels and maybe something red. 82, 74, 45. I just randomly guessed one. Then I'll come over here, so from style. Next one down is size. And the next one down is the color. Oops. I can type it without bumping my mouse pad. If that shows on the screen. I randomly picked colors, so it looks like that one might kind of blend in pretty well. Blend in quite well. But it gives us more refined control over what the borders around that will look like. Same thing with box shadows. Box shadow, right? And we can break it down to the different sizes. Actually, I'll put it on the top because we haven't seen that. 8 pixels. 8 pixels. Some color. Random color. I'll do an HSV color. HSV, so let's say talk about that thing again, right? We want to come maybe halfway around the circle, somewhere between green and blue. So halfway around the circles are about 180 degrees. And then our saturation, how intensely are we showing that color? Not very much, so 43%. And then like how much are the lights? Think about it like the lights. How bright are the lights in the room where we're looking at that color? We want to simulate that on the screen. 78%, maybe fairly bright. And I need another number. I think I would only do 2 if it just did 1, but I type in there somewhere. So I'm gonna take that top off.
yeah, on mine, when I added top, it was big. It didn't like it.
Maybe the top goes in the next place. The next thing we're gonna look at, it shuffles those words around. The main thing I wanted to look at here was negative pixels because we didn't see that earlier, right? So I'll do -8 pixels, -9 pixels, and I'll just do a full box shadow here. So around this one, we saw positive goes right and down. So hopefully you can already guess where the negative ones go. Don't forget to save that. Or did I might have just made a typo. Let me look at the color over here, see if I made a typo. Oh, wait. Okay. HSL, not HSV. Some software uses HSV, some software uses HSB, some software uses HSL. That last letter, there's a subtle difference that if you were getting a graphics art design degree, you would definitely be expected to know the difference of it. But in general, they're roughly the same thing. but there is a subtle difference in. For websites, we have L for lightness. Put an L in there, and you can see negative numbers go the other direction, goes top and left. And if I add the inset in there, which the order doesn't matter. These three numbers, the order matters. Inset, so see, inset causes a problem there. But I think earlier I was typing it at the end, so let me put it before that. There are a few places where the order matters and others where it doesn't. So like in the box shadow, there's three numbers that need to be in a specific order. So we don't, if we try to put our word in between there, it would work, but we can put that word instead at the beginning or the end. As long as it doesn't split up those numbers. As long as it's in there, the browser will figure it out.
When I was writing these rules and stuff, suggestions. It did not recognize offsets. So it's using most like
It's the default, just leave it off.
Yeah.
Microsoft did that. So yeah, if Chrome's not doing it, they take it out of there. But there are a lot of things you have to be careful with those, because in this class we're only going to look at the default stuff that's built into CSS. But like in all of our programming languages, there are a lot of custom modules we can use. There are a lot of things built that aren't in the base version of the language. We'll see a little bit of that. Well, maybe it's on a little bit of that is on my list of odds and ends for like week 8 after we finish all our course content and just have random things to talk about. But by that point, I might I'll have a better idea of some of y'all's personal interests, and usually that particular one doesn't make the final cut because it's not necessarily people's personal interest. So I'm breaking it down this way. Instead of that top and right, I'm going to skip that, but still do the size and the color. Right, would be 8 pixels. And here you can see I'm doing that thing I just warned you against. Shadow, bottom, box shadow, blur. I think I can just type blur. It should be the blur radius. Oh, I forgot to semicolon. End of instruction. Then box shadow color. I pretty much never do this. I have a feeling I have at least one of those words wrong, because I almost always do it all at once, just showing that it can be done this way. Break it down if you just want certain aspects. Oh no, it did work. I think as long as I say, oh, I didn't say it. Okay. I pretty much never do it that way. Yeah, I had a feeling I had at least one of those wrong. But you can take a list. I was just showing that we can break things down into pieces. But in many years of doing this, other than a quick example in class, which always, and this class when I teach it every spring, and always falls after we've already looked at that, it just gets undone and go back one line. That's pretty much the only time I ever break out the pieces of a box shadow.
It at least with Visual Studio, it doesn't recognize box shadow. Doesn't have the options of individual parts.
There are options. They might go on the other side, but I would recommend not doing that anyway. Check the reference material. The predictive text you have to watch out for too. So, we'll see it. VS Code, we will break the predictive text in week 5 with new HTML elements. Or not break it, it won't know what we're doing, and VS Code will underline it and tell you there's an error. At least it did 2 weeks before the semester started, and the new elements came out last May. So maybe they got around to them now, but in week 5, we'll see some stuff that the predictive text just does not know. So be careful relying on those things. But in general, yes, that is a good way to check. But yeah, for box shadow, it's usually a bad idea to break it down anyway. Some of the other ones, I think I'll go back to the earlier order to do that. I'll turn that back on. Oh, wait, I'm taking it. Yeah. I'll leave it like that. That'll work. Just random colors. I'm going to come back up to where we put that border earlier. On the first paragraph. So up here, the one in the Harry Potter looking font. Just basic border, nothing too fancy, shadow on it. But it's rectangular like everything else. It'd be nice if there weren't such sharp corners, right? So we have let's see, end of the line, another line here. Border radius. I'll just do all of them at once. Border radius, and then we choose some sort of percentage. So like 23%. Should be just very slight. And whatever size it is, so if you had a perfect square, an element that was perfectly square, like you went in and hard coded the width and the height value of it, so you knew they were exactly the same, then the curve would be the same on both sides. But along the top, we cut it down by 23%, and down the sides, but with different lengths. Obviously, 23% is different on each one. 50% will make a nice little oval. Kind of rounds it off nicely, turns it into something more of a square. And we can do that on each individual one. So border, radius, and unlike the other ones, my predictive text is back. You can see from my predictive text, which, yeah, I usually turn that off, and right now you can also see why I turn that off in class for class examples. It kind of gets in the way, especially when it goes up, because if y'all are following along the examples, you're probably typing the previous line of code I typed, which would be hidden right now. But we need two sides to identify a corner. So top left, bottom right.
What is the end start options?
Which one?
There's order, top left, top right, yada yada. There's also end start, start end, start.
Well, the best way to check that is going in. Let's see what 33% does on this. I can't remember which one I checked. End. It'll make sense when I put it in start. So do you know how to identify what we need to identify a rectangle? This is something we were going to do after the break today. So, or I was hoping to get to it before the break, but it's already 20 till, so it might be after the break. So how much information do we need to identify a rectangle? What's the minimum amount of data we need to say we have a rectangle?
Length, width, location?
Yeah, but there's a more concise way to do that. Well, that involves tracking, because we have to know which one's length, which one's the width as well. So let's start with the location. right back to math class. Our big grid. And we want to identify this rectangle. So length, width, and location is 3 numbers, but we also need to know which one's length and which one's width. So that actually takes us up to 5 pieces of data, which is a common way to do it. But anybody else want to weigh in? What's a good way to? What's the minimum way to identify a rectangle? Anything? Oh, this might be a good introduction. I like to do this sometime around week 3, usually, whenever there's a question and like nobody seems to know the answer. I may start I will start calling on people, but I like to wait a couple weeks before we do that and find a good introduction to it. So when we ask questions like that, I will start calling on people. And wrong answers are fine. Actually, wrong answers are better because if we can spit out the right answer, I'll just be like, yes, that's correct, and we move on, right? But a wrong answer leads to an explanation. This corner, we know what that is, right? In this case, it's 0.13 like we see in math class. And then if we take this corner, that encompasses all the information you just mentioned, right? Our length is the difference between the x values, and our width is the difference between the y values. So the start and end corners. So that's how we identify a rectangle. That's something we're going to look at today too. We also need a circle. So maybe start thinking about this. What do we need to identify a circle? And what do we need to identify a polygon? Probably about 5 minutes after, or probably when we get back to break. When we get back from break. I was hoping to see that part before break, but. So 2 points will give us a rectangle. We have a good way to identify a circle or a polygon. So I drew a triangle because obviously for our class example, we're only going to do 3 points, but what if our polygon looked like this? Two polygons. What do we need in order to identify those? Think about that. We probably won't get to that till after break, but yeah, the circle one's pretty easy. Actually, they're both easy when you see them. There's multiple ways to do it. But see, now you see where start is.
Start is the upper left. Start end would be bottom left.
Yeah. So start is a bad label because that's XY. So the first start is the X and the second start is the Y.
Yeah.
So then we also, yeah. But that's the learning process, right? Especially if it's on the predictive text, be like, what's this do? Order, I don't know, top, right? I'll say something else in there. Top left, radius 33%, border, bottom left, radius 67%. Get some sort of start to get some nice curvature going on it.
So how do you fix the text to, because you're just altering how do you fix the text to then get the more?
Padding and margins. I was actually looking at that Harry Potter font. I never looked at margins. My thought there was I was thinking I should put a margin on the left or padding. So I'll do some padding. Actually, I was gonna do a funny thing with padding, following the Harry Potter theme, because just doing random things, and I thought I spotted something that might look like a picture. So padding is inside our element, and margins are outside our element. So let's say padding of 3.1 EM. we'll bring it 3 letters over. For that, and obviously we have padding top, padding right, padding bottom. So you would just want to pad it out. I actually had a thought looking at that because we have the Harry Potter thing. This might not be the best colors for it. Negative. If this is gonna work. Actually, my thought might not work. Yeah, it'll work. So padding is inside the element and margin is outside of it. So I'm gonna do margin left. For EM.
So that moves the entire thing.
Yes. And I was trying to move the words, of words sticking out the side. It's not going to, I was thinking of it like just kind of started in the middle and looked like a big blue wave moving out. It would fit that Harry Potter font. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it just passed in my mind. And it could get into something complicated that'll use layouts. Padding is inside the element and margins are outside the element. So 1.2. So kind of spread it out a little. Maybe I'll put it inside of there. So just doing the padding on the left. But a bunch of padding on the left, put the words completely inside of it. Well, inside of it, and then we can do the same thing on the top and the bottom. But because of the way that's curved, probably need different ones, right? Padding bottom looks like quite a bit. 4 EM and padding top. 2 elements. I was looking here, so we have one. We can see here there's 1 word above that curve and 2 words below it, so I just doubled both of those. That's how I went with the EM. Might need to come over a little bit more. And instead of that 4 at the bottom, do 3 at the bottom and come over further with our words. Further than that. I guess I could have counted letters to see how far I need to go. Looks like 3 more letters. So I'll go further than that. 14. There we go. Then it all fits inside of something that an oblong shape looks like it struck my mind as it seemed to fit with the font we randomly put in there. And then it's not quite so random, but that leads into the design principles that we're going to talk about today, right? I was looking at that font, it's like, okay, the Harry Potter font, and threw a curve on there, and it's like, oh, wait, that kind of looks like some of the scenes from the movies. The whole, whatever the word would be, the light coming out of their wand, bolts of light coming out of their wand or whatever. Stick that font inside of there. We'll look for little things like that, little tricks, and that part involves a little more thinking, and then like I was doing there on the padding, refining down to the right number. With EM, we can count letters. I wasn't counting them every time. I was taking guesses a couple times. A lot of times, that's when you're doing stuff like that, it comes down to you start with a guess. You're not sure what the number should be, take a guess at it, and then see how far off you are so that you can start estimating it. Sometimes maybe a couple guesses so that you can start, right after 2 or 3 guesses, you can see about where each number is leading to, and you might have to just kind of do trial and error, find the number. There's a lot of that with CSS. Technically, it can be calculated, but sometimes it's not this situation. That one would have been easy to count. But sometimes because of the way things interact with each other, calculating it is a very tedious process. It takes way longer to calculate it than to just do some trial and error on a few numbers. Take a guess and check. Take a guess and make little adjustments until it looks about right. I'm looking at the inspector real quick. So all the inspectors will also have this, when we hover over the element, where is that one? That is this one. When we hover over that element, we can see the different parts to it. Down at the bottom is a little key. So we have the margin for it. The border, you can see the color coding. Margins outside of it. The width of the border. Padding is inside the border. So notice it still detects our border as a square. It just doesn't show it that way. That'll be important next week when we do layouts and we're adjusting how the elements fit next to each other instead of just stacking them top to bottom like we are this week. And then the content itself. So you should have something like that in whatever browser you're looking at. Keep track of the spaces, and when you go to the inspector and hover over it, you can see the different parts. You also see the syntax there. This one has a class name of first, and in the CSS we just put dot first. But notice the name that popped up there. The name that the computer is recognizing is p dot first. So it does keep track of that it's a paragraph. We won't see many of those this semester, but that is something that does show up occasionally. The class name isn't enough. We need to further, or if we had a section called with a class first and a paragraph called first, and we need to identify between them in our CSS, instead of just dot first, we can put p dot first or section dot first and extend our selector. Frankly, that one almost never shows up because if we wanted to distinguish between them, we just wouldn't give them the same class name. But it seemed a reasonable point to point that out. Also, notice if you click on it to see the properties and scroll down to the style rules, there's the default ones that come from paragraph, what it inherits from HTML, what it inherits from what it means to be a paragraph, and then all the rules we put on ourselves. And when you're testing things, you have nice little checkboxes to turn them on and off to try to find the look you want on it. Weekly homework assignments, that's not going to make much of a difference, right? Because they tell you exactly what to write in those. But your final project proposals due this week, and you're going to do that one entirely from scratch. So you'll be doing a lot more of that stuff. Trial and error, trying to find the look you want on your final project. Which, personally, I think that part's a lot more fun than following the instructions in the textbook. It's like, okay, learned to read a long time ago. It's not hard to follow instructions, but when you're doing it from scratch, then it's fun and it feels more creative, exciting when you get done. Get that general creative aspect. A couple of people's introduction discussion boards. A couple people didn't mention it in this class, but I've seen it in other introduction discussion boards. Do have that artistic nature. Musicians, painters, all that stuff. It's very akin to that. We could jump up and look at the next one. Yeah. So there's two other things. The next two things I wanted to look at with visual elements, I guess three. This one's been around for a long time. Underneath the header, I'm going to put a line, HR. That's horizontal rule. It's an element that's been around for a long time. That's the gray line that goes across things. Whoops, not Control Z. I'm going to hit Control S to save it. Might as well show that. The gray line Personally, I like to do that with borders because we have control over the borders. The horizontal rule element is a gray line, and it's that gray line every time.
That's it.
Yeah.
Nothing you can do about
Yes. So personally, I like to do that with borders, but it exists, and it is people recognize it. Consistency is good, right? Doesn't happen as much. Websites aren't as extreme as software applications, but you really only have a few seconds to convince people to look at your web page, right? Everybody surfed the web before, right? You go and look at something, you start clicking on those results, and that web page designer only has a couple seconds to make sure to look at their site, and that they can't. And yeah, now that we're studying web design, we aren't going to use the data on the site to convince somebody to look at our site. Like everybody, I'm sure everybody here has been there before, right? Start clicking on search results, like, oh, I don't like the way that looks. That's weird color. They use weird font. Before you even start actually checking the page for the thing you're looking for, the words you're looking for, you're going to evaluate it based off colors. Humans are a very visual species. There's no getting around it. That's just and in that case, a horizontal rule is consistent, something they are used to seeing. Consistency goes a long way. That's about all I'm going to say on that one. You need some pictures in here. We'll put a picture up here at the top. We did see a picture once, right? So image source equals, I guess I better go download a picture. What's a good picture for today? Did a beach last time. Desert. Something different than the weather outside. I know over the weekend I was dealing with flooding. Do you all have flooding problems?
it. Really?
I'm in Clarksville. It's the drain swamp, so whenever it rains, it's not drained anymore. It goes back to the swamp.
Hmm.
But it makes the desert sound nice today. So I'm gonna grab a desert picture. Oh, JPEG on the first try this time. That was nice. And just like we saw before, I'm just gonna put it in here. Put it in the same folder. We'll talk about addresses soon. For now, we'll just put everything in the same folder. But look at that though. Should be some properties about it. 1500 by 1000. That's a big picture. That's probably way bigger than I want. I don't know the extension on that one. And I don't have extension shown. JPG, okay. Lowercase JPG. JPEGs are written with different extensions. Sometimes they'll have the E in there, sometimes it's all caps, lowercase. The big problem is capitalization because when we put it on the server, it's going to a Linux server, and Linux is case sensitive. So we saw this before. Put that picture in there. That does not look like 1500 by. I don't know what the size it was. Oh, 275 by 183. Maybe I want it bigger. But that can be a problem, especially with the JPEG. Maybe I want it to be 800 pixels wide. And I'll leave the height there so that it keeps the same aspect ratio. With the JPEG, that's going to get blurry. JPEGs get blurry anytime we change them. Bitmaps and pings we can make smaller. Sometimes we can make pings bigger without them getting blurry, but not always. JPEGs, if we change the size, they get bigger or smaller. We'll get a nice big image on there, but then what happens if somebody does this with their, I was trying to go to the corner. There we go. Let's look at the web page like that. That picture is way too big. That's going to be a bit problematic, right? So we need a way to have better control over that image. Which I was thinking was going to take about 10 minutes, so we should get done with this before the break. And for a long time, that's all we had. But they updated it, let's say 5 years ago, and created a new element where we can choose from multiple pictures. So what I'm going to do is get rid of that size attribute here. And instead of using style rules, obviously, might as well show this. We can also do that in the CSS. I believe your textbook likes to do that in the CSS, which is one that I usually avoid as well. So make the image tags have a width of 800 pixels. And we get the same thing, but it's still distorting our picture. Which
you also have a problem if you have multiple pictures and you're trying to make all of them the same size. It
Yes.
may not work.
Yes, might not want consistency. So the textbook really likes that. But the textbook was written long before the most recent solution for that. So what they came up with just a few years ago was we used this picture element, and inside of this, we can do different source sets. Right. Source, the source set attribute. Set equals, and here we would make different pictures. So I'm just going to quickly open this in Microsoft Paint. So it's going to get really blurry as we make it bigger and smaller, but that's a nice quick way to change the size. Ultimately, you would probably you would go to the art department and ask them to make a larger JPEG, and they would do it in Photoshop and run it through lots of clarity algorithms and bog down big powerful computers for a while clarifying it in order to change the size. It's because JPEGs are actually stored as a wave. The image is stored as a discrete cosine transform. Everybody's had trigonometry or recognize that word about sound waves or waves in general. Not necessarily sound waves. Even the waves in that picture. Waves in that's how it's stored. So that's why JPEGs, if we change the size at all, it gets blurry. But like pings and bitmaps, we can get smaller and we don't lose clarity because they're stored in different ways. I was going to stretch it out, hit select, actually, grab the selection tool, onto the picture, and stretch it out to that new canvas size. So then we have a big one. So I'll do file, save as, I'll give it a JPEG. We call this one Desert Big or something. Desert dash big. The same thing for small. I'll select all of it and then make a really little one. And then bring the canvas, the picture showing on down to that size. So now save that as desert small. Okay, so the details of our example are kind of a bad one because obviously we would want to do this for the clarity reasons, and I just lost all kinds of clarity in that picture. But we have a normal, a big, and a small version of our picture now. So the source set would be desert dash small dot JPEG, and we will come back and decide and define when we want to do that. Source set is, as I'm typing this, I feel like I have these words backwards. But if it doesn't work, we'll go check for typos afterwards. Desert.jpg, then medium, source set equals desert-pig. Okay, right. And we'll come back and fill in the other parts. And then I'm gonna grab this one. Then a default of that old way of putting the images in there. If none of the source sets work, then fall back to the image. And the way I just said that sentence makes me even more certain that I got those words backwards. So it looks like it showed the small one. Okay. So it definitely didn't get to our default, so I guess that is correct. So source set, desert small. So it was able to look at the first one and that worked, so it showed it. But we need criteria in order to narrow down what it's going to be. And we use the media property for that, which picture element, HTML. And this is what y'all are gonna do when you're working on your thing, right? Like, we saw a whole bunch of stuff in class. Can't remember every bit of it. Let's jump over W3 schools. This is the official one. Still looking at the official one. We'll see the best one soon. We'll see the best one when we get to flex and group containers. Keep track of where the official one is. But notice this other attribute they have in there we haven't seen yet. A media. So media is like, how is it showing? So they have min width here. We have min width, max width, screen size, all sorts of stuff. We're going to start putting media queries in our CSS too. But that's what it's showing on. Print is an option. Which image do we want to use when we print? So maybe we have all the like 3 different sizes, and then we have a black and white one. So when we print it, just print the black and white one. Because maybe there's lots of details in the image. So if we let the computer go to black and white on its own, it's not going to come out very clear. Y'all have seen those images, right? People just photocopy randomly without lowering the quality before switching it to black and white, and then you can't tell what the picture is. That's really, really common in education. I guess the most popular meme I saw about that is always a biology class. It's like what did you study in class? And they show the nice picture from the textbook, and then on the test, they show a photocopy one of it, where it's actually the picture from the textbook photocopied into black and white, and you lose, and you can't even read it. It's a common thing. So usually we want to lower the quality of images before we turn them black and white, but if we just hit print, that's not what happens. So when do we want to do this? So we'll add the media and some sort of rule for when that happens. I'm gonna close that page. Okay, and this is what you all are gonna do, right? Everybody feel okay making sense, able to make sense of looking at the reference material?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, because that one I want to make sure of, because this is like the 8th time I've taught this class, so I've done it a few times. And was making websites for many, many, many years before I taught this class the first time. So some of it I don't want to make it look too easy. So our media query, which goes in quote marks, is, oh, there's a good question. Do we want to start with minimum or maximum? Which screen size should we use if we want to worry about the small first? Or think about it this way, watch my hands. Our small pictures first. So we want to show that in a growing sense, right? If we put the largest one first, then we want to show that in like a shrinking one. So it's the width of our screen. So if we said, show the small picture, only put this, let's say minimum, let's say we had 500 pixels. If we're less than 500 pixels, our minimum of 500 pixels, show the small one. Then our next one, media equals minimum of 1000 pixels, which this isn't the right syntax, I have to come back and do it. Then show the medium one. But if it's a minimum of 500 pixels, we already met, we already passed this criteria, so this one isn't needed anymore, right? Think of it as greater than or less than. Our screen size.
It looks at the picture at the picture group is one thing. Once it finds one of those it can use, it stops right to get to the next.
So max would be like greater than 1000 pixels. Max size of greater than 800 pixels. Max size of greater than 400 pixels. Minimum is the screen size going the other way. So we want to worry about when it's, first off, worry about when it's, or sorry, I said that backwards. That's the minimum. And then max is, we're worried about when it's less than 400 pixels. And then going down a selection structure. Is it less than 400 pixels? If it is, then do that size. Otherwise, go on to the next one. Is it less than 800 pixels? Is it less than 1200 pixels? And whatever numbers we're using. So minimum, we're thinking about greater than that. Greater than. So that's the shrinking size. We want to do our largest one first. And as it shrinks down, then our smallest one last. If we're doing less than, that's a growing size, so we won't want to use max. So when it's the smallest size, then show the smallest picture. If it's not the smallest size, then check to the next biggest size. If it's not this, yeah, if else. I think everybody's seen a little bit of programming, right? So an if else, if smallest size will be our max, else mid size, then left. Minimum we do if largest size, then if medium, else if smallest.
Does it really matter which one you do? Is that just
It matters. So what if I did minimum 500 pixels here? It's going to say a minimum screen size of 500 pixels would show this. It's going to go on minimum of 1000 pixels. But 500 pixels is bigger than 1000, right? So if we were 400 pixels, it makes a difference. We'll put it in here. I'll start with minimum because we want the maximum one here. Minimum equals 500 pixels. And notice how we do have to put the units. Usually we leave the units off. Let me take this right. Min width is, what are our picture sizes? Less than 100, 500, and 200. So yeah, 500 work, 400 work. 400 pixels. Min width of 800 pixels. I'll just do the one that's on the board. That should work. Or media equals min width of 1200 pixels. having word wrap on for the code is throwing me off, but I wanted to make sure it all shows on the screen. So here's the min width one. And how wide's our screen right now? Actually, if I open the inspector, we can see how wide it is. Inspector, and then somewhere on here when I start moving. There we go. Oh, 838 pixels. So at 838 pixels, what picture should we be using?
The biggest one.
I think the middle one. But yes, you're on here. Yeah, about 800 in them. When it passes 800, at a minimum width of 800 pixels, start showing the middle one. And a minimum width of 1200 pixels, start showing the biggest. But since it already worked there, it's going to show our smallest picture and just keep showing our smallest picture. I guess I can't. I shouldn't go to 1200 because we can't see the number, but now that I see those numbers on there, maybe 400, 700, and 900.
So
Those are all smaller than those numbers popping up.
basically you want to have the largest one first, so it checks that.
Yeah, so it's like an if-else structure, right? Like a common one you may have seen in other programming classes, for those who have had other programming classes, is like a gradebook thing. It's a common introduction for the if-else structure. Think of it like an if-else, your if-else structure, or your gradebook, right? You can either start with an A and then go down. If it's not an A, then it's a B. Not an A or a B, then it's a C. So now, really narrow all the way under 400 pixels before we see the small one. And then in that mid-range, we see that medium picture. And I might have made a typo on the last one. And then after a certain, wait, which one glitched out there?
I think the large size, because that's the default. Because after, if all else fails, use the regular.
Yeah, so then it went to the regular one. So the large size probably has a typo on it. Oh, yes. JPEG. Which is where alt text comes in. When this shows up in your homework, let me keep that in there. When this shows up in your homework, they're going to use a picture before they show you how to make a picture pass validation. There's something with two purposes. If I add alt, that's alternative text. A small desert dunes. So alternative text, which screen readers will identify that. Isn't that where that goes? Maybe I need to put it in the. I thought it went there. Okay, did I save it? Okay, I don't know why the alt text isn't pulling up. I wanted to do that before break, but it's probably a good time for a break, right? Alt text is also used by screen readers. It's a validation thing, so your homework this week, the one that's due next Monday, won't pass validation because they tell you to put a picture in there before they tell you about the alt text. We will look at that in a moment because it's probably already past time for a break. 10 minutes sound good to everybody? And then one more thing with pictures. Quick thing to look at with pictures after the break, and then we'll get into design principles, which we're just introducing them quickly, and then we'll probably still be out of here by about 5 after 3. Take 10 minutes. My laptop says 2:18, so we'll get back to it at 2:28. See y'all in just a moment.